that they're honored to them. So back, let's see, my son is 16, and when he was 5, he went camping with his granddad at Rocky Gap State Park. Maybe you've heard of Rocky Gap State Park before.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and he came home from the camping trip and um he had a bug bite, but had a great time with his granddad. And he came down with a fever a few days after the camping trip. I took him to the pediatrician and he said, "Oh, there's a virus going around this summer. It's causing some fevers. He'll be fine in a couple days. Don't worry about it." So then I said, "Great." And the following week, he had soccer camp. It was in July, and he had soccer camp and he was running. And about halfway through the camp, he kind of limped off the field and said, "I don't want to play anymore. My knees hurt. My knees hurt. My knees hurt." And I was like, "Well, get back out there, like, you'll be fine. Run it off." So that night, I put him in the bathtub and I took off his shirt, and he had little pink rings of rash on his entire torso.
Whoa.
And I said, "Oh, that wasn't a virus." Um, we never saw the tick. We did see where the tick had bitten him. I noticed that right away. And when I looked at his leg where the original bite was, there was just the faintest pink ring that kind of went all around his leg. The rings on his chest were about the size of a golf ball, and they were all over his chest. So what that means is that the bacteria that originated in that tick bite down on his ankle had spread through his skin and were making those inflammatory rash things on his torso. So we caught it, kind of late actually. It had already spread through his skin. But that kind of shows you how hard it is to spot some of this stuff because ticks are really, really small. And if you don't see the tick and you don't get the bullseye bright red rash, it's hard to tell what's going on because, a lot of the symptoms of Lyme disease are just normal things like a fever and you feel kind of tired and you might have achy knees. So it can be a really tricky situation to be in. So my message for almost everyone is to just really check yourself for ticks and anytime that you've been outside for them. Because if you can find the tick, then you're in a much better situation. So after my son got sick, and by the way, he's fine. He was on antibiotics for a few weeks and he was fine. I started thinking about when I grew up here. I grew up in Cumberland, and I remember hearing once or twice about ticks in the woods, but it was never a thing that we had to be aware of or be worried about, and there weren't that many of them. And I had this boy now that was sick from a tick, and I thought, what is going on? Are there ticks here? I can't believe it. I never had to worry about this before. And so that's when my research story began. I just started looking around and collecting ticks from the area. Um, I had several people who were interested in it as well. So I kind of spread the word and made it a public citizen science type of project. So now I basically ask the public to mail ticks to me. And any tick that they mail, I identify and I put it in a big database. And for some of them, we test them for Lyme, and it's a great project because a lot of students are involved, and it has meaningful data to the community. So I'm going to share some of that and some just basic information about ticks in our area. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Have you seen this tick before? Anyone?
Oh yes, on my
Yeah.
dog.
and on me.
Okay, this is the famous black-legged deer tick. It is the one that carries Lyme in addition to other things. So there's a bacteria causes anaplasmosis. There's a parasite that causes babesiosis. There's certain viruses that this tick carries, and they can all make you sick. So this tick is probably the one I least like or I hate the most. I don't usually use the word hate, but ticks qualify. So this kind of tick is the deer tick. What you most need to worry about with this one is the adult female. So she has kind of an orangey red abdomen, and it's about the size of I would say the size of well, maybe a sesame seed. Sesame seed. So if you can picture a sesame seed, that's the size of this adult female. She is larger than the male, but the male you don't need to worry about because the male doesn't bite. So hooray. You do need to worry about, though, the nymph. So the life cycle of a tick goes like this. It hatches from the egg, and when it hatches, it's called a larva. Larvae are fine because they're mostly sterile when they hatch out of the egg. They don't have any germs. They have 6 legs when they hatch. So if you count those legs there, there's 6 legs. And they take a blood meal from whatever animal is around, usually a mouse or something. And then they grow into these nymphs. So the nymph has 8 legs. It grows another set of legs, which I find crazy. And it can also have these germs, right? Because if it bit a mouse that had the germ, then it has it now. And nymphs are the ones that cause the most cases of Lyme disease because they're so small that nobody sees them. That's the real issue. So nymphs are about the size of a poppy seed. So if you can picture the size of a poppy seed, that is what this thing looks like. I usually tell people to look at their arms and find the smallest freckle that they have, and that's what you're looking for with ticks. Each species of tick has a slightly different seasonality. So for this tick, the adults you'll typically find in October all the way through winter and into the spring. So look for the sesame seeds starting October. And if you hike in the wintertime, they're certainly around. The nymphs are more spring and summer. The worst time for them, at least in our neck of the woods, is May and June. When it gets really hot and dry, this drought has been really hard on these ticks. That's a time when you'll see fewer of them. And then the larvae are hatching in late summer through fall. So again, the worst times for these are adults will be fall through the winter, and then nymphs are spring through summer. So there's basically no time of year when there are no ticks out. Any questions about these guys? So one important thing to know about deer ticks is that they prefer to live in the forest. So if you are walking through a mowed field, like you're playing golf or something, like you're just in a manicured lawn, you're probably not going to run into this tick. They prefer to live in shaded forests. They really like to hang out at the bottom of the forest in the leaf litter. So if you're hiking and you like to hike on forest trails, this is a concern. Or if your dog likes to run around in the woods, that's a concern. So that's where you'll mostly find these types of ticks. Okay, how about this one? Anybody recognize this tick?
No.
Oh,
No?
yes, I've seen that one too.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of dogs.
So the dog tick is another one that's really common around this area, but it's big. So that's a good thing. You can see it much better. So the adult female here, she is about the size of a sesame, well, a sunflower kernel, like a shelled sunflower seed is pretty much the size of that. And then the nymph is about the size of a sesame seed. So they're almost twice as big as deer ticks. These guys tend to be in the grassy fields. So if you're walking through high grass or walkways or things where there's grassy landscape, that's where you'll find the dog ticks. If your dog is running through those areas, they might be able to pick up some of those dog ticks. I tend to not worry so much about these when I find them. They can carry diseases like Rocky Mountain spotted fever, tularemia, and those types of things, but it's pretty rare that they do. So typically, when I find one of these, I don't worry so much. Also, these guys tend to like scalps. So you'll often find them if they're on you, they're going to probably be on your head. Whereas the deer ticks tend to stay down and they like to find warm, dark places like behind your knee or in your belly button or somewhere in your body rather than on your head. They just don't have the energy to climb that high. Okay, this one is definitely where you are, but it's not really where I am. So this is kind of an interesting one for us because I'm sure that you guys have seen these or they're at least in your area.
I
But
actually had one on me one time and
did
it was
you?
like, oh God, I got it off right away, thank God.
Good for you. Yeah, so this is the Lone Star tick. And it has made lots of headlines because it has the potential to make you allergic to red meat.
Oh my.
Isn't that weird? So if you get bitten by one of these ticks, potentially you will no longer be able to eat hamburgers, steaks, lamb, any type of red meat. And it actually is kind of hard because, you know, even like the bun or something, it's tricky. So a lot of people tell me that they'd rather have Lyme disease than this this one than red meat allergy. I'd be okay with you don't want Lyme disease. It could be really bad. But also these ticks carry other stuff too. So they carry a lot of the spotted fevers, different kinds of bacteria that can also make you really sick. So what I really don't like about these ticks is that they have a different behavior than the dog ticks and the deer ticks. They actually will hunt you down. They're aggressive. So if they smell a mammal, an animal of any kind, they will actually follow the scent and get on you. Whereas the deer tick or the dog tick, they're just kind of holding on to grass or leaves. And if you walk by and brush up against them, that's when you get them. They don't actually like crawl toward you and bite you. These Lone Star ticks will smell you and hunt you down.
Huh.
So yes, they're not nice at all.
So if you're
The way,
sleeping on like on a campsite or something,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So they can smell, so to speak. And the way to tell a Lone Star tick is pretty easy. It's got this bright yellowish whitish dot right in the middle of its body.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's the Lone Star, right? And again, you don't have to worry about males because they don't bite. But the nymphs are also carriers of the germs. Um, so those are the big three in our area and probably in your area too. You actually might have another tick called the Gulf Coast tick, which is slowly making its way up through Maryland. I've seen one or two out here, but not very many. Again, another tick that keeps spreading. And now this guy. So this is a new one. Oops, sorry. So this is a brand new kind of tick. It doesn't bite people, or it doesn't carry germs that hurt people so far. But it is such a strange tick. So this is called the longhorn tick. And so far it's only scary for cattle or hooved animals. So it carries a parasite that will kill cows. Um, Cattle farmers are very, very worried because entire herds can be wiped out by a tick, this tick. The scary thing about this tick is that it doesn't need a male to reproduce. So the female can actually just divide.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can go out into a field, a grassy field, and find larvae and nymphs and adults by the hundreds, because it just takes that one adult to divide and to make more. And so usually what happens is you find larvae at this time of year, and then you find nymphs at this time of year, and then you find adults at another time of year. But it's like all the time you can find all three stages. They also don't care if they're in hot sunshine. They're perfectly happy in warm, dry places. It's crazy. So these are invasive. They came over from Asia, and they think that they came over earlier than 2017, but 2017 was the first time that people really started noticing. That outbreak, so to speak, was in New Jersey, and it has been spreading throughout the Atlantic coast ever since. Now, 2 years ago was the first time I saw one in Allegheny County, but they have been in the eastern side of the state for since 2019, 2020. So they are spreading very, very, very quickly. But again, the good news is so far, these ones don't cause disease to humans. So
Are they dangerous for horses? Will they kill
yes,
horses also?
anything with a hoof.
With a hook. Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Milton, look out.
Huh.
Yeah. Um, so just as like a size comparison, there's some charts here for you to take a look at. Again, the deer tick, the one at the bottom here, is the smallest of the three. And then here's your dog tick, it's big. And then the Lone Star is kind of in between. This is kind of a funny picture because you'll never ever find them in the same place like this. But I think it was just staged to have a good photo. So again, how do they get germs and how do you get sick from them? For all ticks, except those weird longhorn ticks, you hatch from an egg as a larva, and then that larva, I mean, a tick is a weird thing because all it does is have two meals. Its whole life, like two, that's it, two meals. So, and it has to have blood, right? So it can't eat anything else. So it's basically looking for a blood meal as soon as it hatches out of the egg. And it's down real low on the forest floor. They're tiny little things. They don't have any energy. And so they're just kind of waiting for whatever runs by them. So if you think of animals that are down low to the ground, typically those animals are going to be rodents like mice, chipmunks, little voles, little moles, whatever. And the thing about rodents is that a lot of them can carry these germs and not get sick. So their immune systems are pretty good in just sort of keeping the germs at bay, and the mice are totally fine. So if you infect a mouse with Lyme disease, there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't get sick. But when the tick bites that mouse that's infected, it now is infected. And so that larval tick, after it has a meal, has enough energy now to go into the next stage of its life, which is the nymph. So over the winter, it basically molts and grows that extra set of legs. And then in the springtime, it comes up out of the forest floor and is looking for another animal. Now, this nymph is a little bit bigger, it's a little bit stronger, so it can go a little higher, right? If you're a larva, you're like on the leaves on the bottom of the forest floor. If you're a nymph, you can get a little bit higher, like maybe you're on a stem of a little plant on the forest floor, and you can hold your hands up and wait for something to come by. And so that's usually either another mouse, a possum, a squirrel, even deer and humans, cats, dogs, anything nearby. They don't care. They just want blood. So again, some of those nymphs might have picked up the germ from the first blood meal it has, and it's able to take a bite and give that new host whatever germs it's carrying. Then, same thing, if one of these animals has the germ, it can pick it up. And when it does, it'll molt into an adult and, be ready to transmit whatever it bites next. In the case of a deer tick, the adults are male and female. The male will climb up to a deer and will climb up on its body. And the deer is considered the reproductive host. So the ticks don't mate unless they're on a deer. The female will take a blood meal from that deer because she has to have enough energy to lay eggs. The male doesn't. They mate, the ticks mate, and then they fall off the deer. The female will lay 3,000 or so eggs, and they both die, basically. So that's the life cycle. So if you wanted to break this up, what do? Well, get rid of mice. If you have mice in your area, do your best to try to get them to not be in your house or near your property. If I was managing state park lands or something like that, I would say encourage more snakes, encourage more owls, encourage more foxes, things that like to eat mice. So, the unfortunate thing about mice is they really like where humans have been because there's all kinds of goodies around for them and warm spots. So if we can get rid of mice, that will help a lot. All right. So these are some ugly maps that show you where black-legged ticks have been and where they're kind of going. So at the top, this is a map of the eastern half of the US. The red areas are where the deer ticks have been for at least a year. And the blue areas are where ticks have been noticed recently. And so this is before 1996 at the top. And then at the bottom, this is 2015. So that's almost 10 years ago now. And you can see how that red has just sort of spread all throughout the eastern portions of the US. I think probably what's happening now is that we're going to see this big U shape. Michigan and the Midwest are now being pummeled by tick invasion. So they're spreading a lot. And why are they spreading? Oh. There's a lot of ideas. Climate change is definitely one of them. Ticks do not like dry environments. So if you have a dry winter that is really cold, they're not going to be they're going to die because they're really sensitive to desiccation or drying out. So if we have a cold winter that's dry, that's great. You'll wipe out a lot of ticks. But if you have a wet winter with lots of snow, lots of water, ticks love that and they can overwinter better. So as the winters are warming and becoming more moist, the ticks are very happy and can move to new places. And so the cases of tick-borne disease will go up, which we've seen. And so before I go into like my data and what I've looked at, does anybody have any other questions or comments about ticks you've seen or?
Well, I don't want to, I don't want to usurp your, we can unmute if somebody else has a question.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can do that. I guess I'll have to do it one person at a time.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, I didn't get into this till about 10 minutes after it had already begun. But I live out of town in a rural area on the back part of a farm.
Mhm.
And whenever I'm cutting the grass with my zero turn, uh, I always end up having at least one or two deer ticks on me. And then what I found with the deer ticks is they don't just crawl on you, they burrow under your skin. And I have to get them picked out if I can find them with my fingernail. And then when I go down to the doctor, he starts me on a thing of doxycycline.
Yes.
And I've done this many times and many times over. I probably have like 8 to 10 deer ticks that I have collected already this summer, plus
Mm.
3 standard sized ticks. So I don't know if initially when you started about the deer ticks, whether you got into them burrowing under your skin, they're not just crawling on top of it.
Mm-hmm. They do like to find places that are warm and dark. So they'll tend to try to get near your belly button or like in your waistband or, you know, and they usually don't go for your head. They usually find some place from your ankles to your midriff
Well,
quicker.
usually with the ones I've gotten off, they're between my knee and my ankles.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like they have to decide if it's worth it. Like, should I waste my energy climbing or not?
Yeah.
So the higher,
Rebecca, I've got another question, and that is,
sure.
would does bug spray help at all with these? Maybe you're going to talk about that later.
Yes. So let me jump ahead a second and let me
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh, you're fine. The best
usurp that.
step for prevention is this. So, this is Sawyer's permethrin. You can buy this at any kind of outdoor store. I think Walmart has it too, actually. It's in a yellow bottle, but it's permethrin and it's not for your skin. You should not spray this on your skin. It is for your clothes, your boots, your tents, your hiking boots, your backpacks, any kind of fabric at all. And it lasts 6 months or 6 washes. So you can put it through the washer and your clothes are still repellent. This stuff is great because you don't have to put it on your skin, and it really, really works for ticks. It also works for mosquitoes. So if you go hiking in Panama, you can also not worry about mosquitoes if you've treated your clothes. So I actually spray this on all my hiking gear anytime I go out. Another good thing, I'm sure you heard of this before, is wear pants and tuck your pants into your socks. So you look fabulous with socks pulled over your pant legs, but it helps. It prevents them from getting in to your skin. Another thing that works really well is, again, ticks hate the heat and drying. So if you come inside and you've been outside, just take your clothes off, throw them in the dryer for 10, 15 minutes. High heat, they'll die. If there are any on your clothes, they'll be gone. So that's another thing you can do. If you don't want to spray your clothes, you can just come in and throw them all in the dryer.
Now, Rebecca, does this repellent and the drying trick, does that work for all variety of ticks?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. Now, bug spray, bug repellent, DEET, those types of things, they can kind of work. Like, yeah, the tick isn't going to be happy and it might not bother you, but it still might. You know, they're not 100%. They're not gonna. It's just sort of a, I don't, not repellent, but like ooh, it stinks. I don't want to be around you. But there's no guarantee that a tick wouldn't come on you anyway.
Okay.
So I recommend the permethrin spray. Again, it's just a help, right? It's like when you had masks and COVID, like the mask doesn't keep you from getting sick, but it helps. So the permethrin will help. It's like an extra layer of protection, but the best thing to do is just anytime you're outside, when you come in, just check. Just look for freckles that move. I mean, that's basically what it is. Look for freckles that move. So that's the number one thing is just check yourself all the time.
I have a question.
Annoying, but it's the way to go. Yes.
I've always been taught that the ticks will crawl up to basically in grass, the highest point, and wait for someone to pass by. But
Mhm.
we, in raising girls through Girl Scouts, they were always told to wear hats in the woods to be able to prevent ticks from falling on them from the trees. And I just wonder if that's
That's not true.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, so you're right about the grass and they climb up, but they don't have the energy to climb high. They just don't. And they don't climb trees, and you don't have to worry about them falling from trees. It is good to wear a hat when you're hiking though, because I'm always the one that walks through the spider webs. So it's nice to have a hat on and get the spider webs out of the way. But yeah, the ticks do not fall from trees. For whatever reason, that's a myth that keeps spreading and hanging around, but no. The one thing that I like to say about ticks is that thank goodness they don't have wings and they can't fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so mosquitoes are the other one that, spreads germs and takes blood meals, but they fly, so they're even worse, I think. If you do have a tick that is attached to you, there's different ideas about how to take them off as well. So I just wanted to share this with you really quick. If you use a tweezer, that's really the best way, a good set of tweezers, and just get the tweezers down as close to your skin as possible and just yank it. It is okay if the mouth parts are still stuck in your skin. You don't need to worry about it. I would rub it maybe with a little rubbing alcohol. But if the mouth parts, if you can see the head, so to speak, in your skin, that's okay. Because the germs are actually in the body. And over time, those germs are migrating down into the mouth of the tick. So what you really don't want to do is grab the butt end of the tick and squeeze it. Because if you're thinking, think of a turkey baster, right? Like, you don't want to squeeze the germs into your flesh. So it's best just to take the tweezers and try to get it low and just yank it up. But yeah, you don't need to worry about the mouth parts getting stuck. They'll come out like a splinter eventually anyway. People also ask me, like, how long does it take if the tick is on me? There's been a lot of studies on transmission rates and how long that takes to transmit germs into a human. Some of the studies, some of them say 24 hours. Some of them say 6 to 48 hours. The general rule of thumb is 24 hours, especially for Lyme. It usually takes that amount of time. But honestly, like, if you don't know how long that tick has been on you, and you know it's been at least more than a couple hours, I really think you should go to the doctor and get doxycycline. And I'll show you why with our data, but basically, why risk it, right? Like, if the tick has been on you for 2 hours, there's like a 10% chance, but that's still 10%, right? Like, they could have it, you don't know. So I think it's best to go ahead and get treated as long as you're able to take doxycycline. Okay, so let me go back to our data a little bit here. It's not going to be pretty. So yeah, a long time ago now, gosh, it was 2018, I started asking people to send me ticks. And basically, it's just kind of spread through social media, newspapers, word of mouth. People have heard about this and they tape their ticks to a piece of paper. You just tell me the date and the location where you found it, and we test them and put them on our map and see where ticks are and what they're carrying. And it's actually been really fun. My students have gotten all these letters with all these little ticks taped to them, and they do all the analysis. So that's been really cool. I guess that my highlight came when I got a letter in the mail that was addressed to the tick lady. So that was like crowning achievement. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would be the tick lady, but here I am. So what we do with these ticks when we get them is we first look at them under the microscope and make sure we know what type of tick it is and what species and what stage of life it's in. And then we do the best part, we grind them up. Very satisfying to poke holes in ticks and break them into bits. So we grind them up and we extract DNA. It takes a day or two to get the DNA out. Then we do a test called PCR to look for the Lyme bacteria. And what we found, most of the ticks that get mailed to us are adults instead of nymphs. And that makes sense because adults are bigger and they're easier to see. So we tend to get a lot of adults, and these are only black-legged deer ticks. We get a lot of different types of ticks, and we get a lot of bugs too that aren't even ticks, but that's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I'm only looking at deer ticks here. So the data you're going to see are deer ticks. So most of them are adults. We get them all times of year. So there is not a month of year where we don't get any ticks. Now, that being said, it gets a little tougher for them in the winter, right? So we've got fewer in January, February, November, and December. It's cold. People aren't out as much, for one, so they're not mailing them to us. But also, ticks are going to struggle in the cold weather. They're going to try to stay buried down underneath the soil and leaf litter, so they're not really out very much. But again, if it's a nice, warm, wet winter, then sure, they'll go for it. The other time when we don't see as many is right now in the heat of the summer. This is true of deer ticks. Other types of ticks, dog ticks, they're fine. Deer ticks do not like to be out in the heat in the summer. So July, August, not so scary. But look at how it spikes in May and June. Ouch. So springtime, early summer, that's prime tick time. And we found what we'd expect with nymphs and adults. The nymphs are in blue here. We see those in spring, early summer. Adults you can really find pretty much year round. And this is the biggest problem. So when we test these ticks, these deer ticks for Lyme disease, 40% is what we're finding, positivity rate. So with those kind of odds, 40%, I actually looked up in the Merck manual. So the Merck manual is this big red book that doctors use for diagnosing infectious disease and how to treat infectious disease. I looked up Lyme disease, and people always ask me, like, if I find a tick, what should I do? Should I just wait and see if I get symptoms, or should I get treated with doxycycline? And there is a threshold for that in the Merck manual. It says that if you are in an area where 30% of ticks are positive for Lyme, then you should get doxycycline as a prophylactic. So we have surpassed that, right? We're at 40% right now. So that means that if you have a tick on you and it's identified as a deer tick and it's been attached to you for more than a few hours, or you don't know how long it's been attached to you, you should definitely ask your healthcare provider for doxycycline, because you just have to be on doxycycline for a few days. It's not a big deal, hopefully, and you don't have to worry about it after that. If you don't, and you know you had the tick, and you start getting symptoms, or maybe you didn't even see the tick and you're feeling sick and you don't know why, Lyme disease can get bad because a lot of people tend to, throw it out as, oh, it's just a flu, or doctors might even not recognize it right away. Say about a third of the people get the bullseye rash at the tick bite site, but a lot of people don't get the rash. So that's why prevention is the key, right? And being like actively aware that ticks are around, look for ticks, check for ticks. And if you find a tick attached to you, go ahead and get the doxycycline. So 40%, it's a sad number.
How long does it take for the tick to die once you tape it down to a piece of paper and mail it into you? I mean, because
Great question.
the majority of ticks that come off of me, well, not the majority, every one of them are still living.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I first started this project, I kind of got in trouble with our campus mail, with our campus mail deliverers, because they were worried that the ticks were going to crawl out of the envelope. And that's fair. I was like, oh gosh, I didn't even think of that. I told everybody to seal it in an envelope and in a baggie and tape it down and all that. But yeah, they could have been still alive. So I have changed my messaging since then and said, please do not send me live ticks. I want to protect the mail deliverers in our area. But one thing that you can do is if you want to send me a tick, you can put it in the freezer for a day. And it may or may not kill them, but it's going to make them so weak and so slow that it'll get into the mail and it'll be fine. I have not ever gotten a live tick since I think 2018. And I like it when people tape them down too, so even if they are alive, they can't get out of that Scotch tape.
Well, I used to put them in my medicine bottles, and then when I would go to the doctor, I'd ask him, have you ever had a tick on you? He'd tell me no. Have you ever seen a live deer tick? No. And then I just open the cap and dump it down on his table. So,
Yep, I've gotten some medicine bottles too. Yeah, they're good for it. Yep. Yep. So, pretty much every year now, people have been sending me these ticks, and it doesn't matter what time of year it is. That 40% number is pretty consistent. They are carrying Lyme. So it's not good news. It's everywhere. There's no particular place where there's more or less. And that's pretty much our conclusion is the ticks are here. The ticks are here all year. They're here every year. And 40% of them are carrying Lyme disease. So be aware. Let me share with you also just a couple of pictures. I said, look for moving freckles. That's true. Like these are dots, right? They're really, really small. If you ever have a picture of a tick that you want identified, feel free to send it to me, email me, or find me on Facebook or however you like to communicate. I'll be happy to identify it for you. A lot of people send me pictures of ticks just because they're scared, like, what kind of tick is this? Should I be worried? And I tell them right away. There are also a good number of websites out there. Let me see if I can find some.
Dr. Taylor,
Yeah.
you may also have already addressed this before I got on, but did you go into the type of symptoms that a person can have if they do not get treated with doxycycline or some other medication?
Right. So Lyme starts out as early Lyme disease, and that's when you typically have a fever and fatigue feels like the flu. Sometimes the fever can be pretty high.
How about the joints like arthritis?
Yes. So in time, weeks to months later, you get very sore joints. That's another symptom, especially in the knees. In fact, in adolescence, that's one of the very first things that they notice is for whatever reason, adolescents tend to, their knees like swell up and get really painful. But yeah, arthritis, sore joints. And then further on down, the bacteria can get into internal organs like the heart and cause heart problems, and also the central nervous system and cause all kinds of neurological symptoms. And the thing about these bacteria, I'll show you a picture of them. They're not like other bacteria. They can swim. So they are actually little spirals, and they can worm around in you, so to speak. They can swim around. And what they tend to do is they don't really stay in the bloodstream. They go into your lymphatics, like your fluids between tissues, and they tend to swim in places where antibiotics are hard to reach. So like the joints, for example, are a great place for this bacteria because if you have an infection in your joints, it's actually pretty hard to treat. The antibiotics don't get there very easily. So that's why if it goes too long, usually patients have to have antibiotics IV, and it has to be for several weeks to be able to really get rid of these bacteria.
Dr. Taylor,
Mhm.
I have a friend who has what she describes as long Lyme disease. Basically, she has neurological problems from it and she doesn't function.
Mhm.
Is this because she didn't get it treated quickly? Is this because it was on her too long? What brings that about? I'm just curious.
Oh, me too. Yeah, these are heartbreaking stories because for whatever reason, either the treatment was late and the bacteria had spread to such a wide degree that it caused damage, or because maybe the antibiotics didn't work as well as they could have, and a few bacteria were able to survive and go to these places. But again, if these bacteria are allowed to live, they can go in really deep, dark crevices and cause problems. There are some theories now where even after long-term antibiotics, where all the bacteria should be dead, it could be that the inflammation that was caused by the infection is actually causing long-term symptoms too. So the immune system is thinking that the bacteria are still there and they're causing inflammation in those sites. But and that's almost like an autoimmune issue. Like your immune system just won't stop the attack. So there's a lot of nuts to crack with long-term Lyme disease. It's really, really tricky. And the bacteria itself is kind of interesting. It doesn't have any like scary things about it. Like a lot of bacteria will make toxins or will dig into cells and cause them to rupture, or they'd actually do things that kill your tissues. This bacteria doesn't do anything. It just swims around. And it's your immune system that freaks out when it sees it, which it should, but it's actually the inflammation caused by your immune system that causes the disease symptoms.
Wow. Dr. Taylor, could you share with us a way for us to communicate with you? I know you had a slide there.
Okay,
And
before
I
I
think
do
that
that,
we could send that out probably as a follow-up email, possibly.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So one more thing, if there are any gardeners out there,
Ah,
there are some plants that tend to spread and make nice, thick, dense, humid environments. If you have Japanese barberry in your garden, if you have Pachysandra, honeysuckle, they tend to like really spread and they're invasive and they they make perfect environments for mice and ticks to hide out in. And there's actually a lot of studies now on Japanese barberry. The birds eat these berries and then they fly over the forests and poop them out. And then Japanese barberry gets all through the forests. And so there's been some studies where they've looked at forests that have Japanese barberry invasions and forests that don't. And the ticks are like triple population in those forests with Japanese barberry. So if you see any of these at a nursery, don't buy them, don't plant them. Just some things to keep in mind. But yes, my contact information is right here.
Dr. Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
are you familiar with a Dr. Harple McGatt that is in this area that's supposed to be an authority on Lyme tick disease on the East Coast?
No, please let me spell his name or she.
Okay, it's a he,
Okay.
and he has an office in Germantown, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I can spell his last name is Margot. And I don't know how to spell Harp.
Okay.
My son, I would assume phonetically it's like Harpal, but my son
Okay.
was from the area here, and then he ran into people coming from Pittsburgh down here to see this doctor. And from what I understand, I mean, he's supposed to be an authority on treating Lyme disease. And then also, you may have addressed before I came on here, because I came on late, but Lyme disease supposedly it originated like in Lyme, Connecticut.
Yes.
Okay. Did you cover that?
No, I did not. Yeah. I'm more about like where these ticks are and what they're doing and what they're
Right.
carrying. But yes, so the first time that a doctor put two and two together and said, wait a minute, this is arthritis happening in kids. What's going on here? The first time that it came together that this was a new disease that had never been seen before, that was in the 60s in Lyme, Connecticut. And then eventually Willy Bergdorfer was the scientist who found that there's bacteria in the ticks. So the bacteria is named Bergdorferi in his honor.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't you want a bacteria named after you?
I
Well,
do.
Rebecca, we're almost at the end of our time together. I can't tell you how informative this has been,
Been
and
great.
we are going to be posting the video of this podcast. And I'm glad that you are doing the work you're doing and doing all this research. Frostburg's come a long way from when I was there.
Yeah, we're still out here kicking.
Yeah, it's a great school.
Feel free to visit anytime. Look me up. I'll give you a tour.
Take us out to find some ticks.
So I do a lot of field work, and honestly, I like it better when people mail them to me. I don't like to go out and collect them anymore.
I don't blame you. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and especially to thank Dr. Rebecca Taylor
Yes.
for sharing her knowledge and her humor about ticks with us. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a great
Rebecca. It's been
night.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
No
job.
problem. Have fun, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.